Welcome back to the Unpopular Kids. It's I, your host, Moses Lassiter, and I have a guest that you may recognize.
Daniel Gradies. Thank you so much for having me back on.
You gotta say your name the way you did it the last time.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Daniel Gradies. I'm very happy to be back.
No, there was more of an R in it last time.
Daniel Gradies.
Yeah, it was that. That's how he introduced himself last time. And I'd like to keep that going, just because I can't roll my R's. So.
Daniel Gradies.
See?
Back again.
See, I'm
in
living
Los Angeles.
Vicariously through that. Some people say Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's not right.
I'm like,
That's just not right.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
That's just like not trying. That's like anti-try.
That's anti-try Los Angeles.
Anyway, I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me back. And for deeming me unpopular enough to be on the Unpopular Kids.
Yeah, I'm really starting to think, I'm just like, that's just,
Is it too early for that?
I was like, what is he doing? It's never too early. Listen, you're a grown man. You do what you want. I lost my train of thought. Go ahead. Take it.
It was a long week, so
He's
we're having
a little daddy soda.
A little drink.
A little daddy soda.
Adult beverage. Cheers.
Beverages. Cheers.
Cheers.
It has been a long week. There are just a lot of things going on in the world right now. You have, you got the Dems doing stuff. You got the Repubs doing stuff. You got everybody in between doing stuff.
Really, the Repubs doing stuff this week, while the Dems are staying quiet because they think that it's politics is normal.
You got politicians politicking.
Yeah.
And you got, cops doing stuff.
Cops doing stuff.
It's so funny when I think about I do have to bring this up. There's like that cop argument where they're like, well, you got to understand there are good cops and there are bad cops. And my thing is, it's like, if I am getting on an airplane, the last thing I want someone to tell me is like, well, you have good commercial pilots or you have bad commercial pilots.
It is so fucking true. It is so fucking true. It's like, there's some good cops among the bad cops. Like, so what do? We do nothing because there's some good cops?
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you hire someone that's good at their job or do you want to hire someone that's bad at their job? If you're an employer, do you want to keep someone that's good at their job or do you want to keep someone that's bad at their job? And I've just never understood that argument. It blows my mind.
But the mode of operation for policing in America is hiring your peeps. You know what I mean? Like
it's like a fraternity.
It's like a fraternity, yeah. And you go through the fucking hazing session, and then after 12 hours of studying, you end up as a fucking police officer who gets to walk around with a gun.
It's so funny that, because now that you compare it to a fraternity, it makes so much sense that bond and that level of loyalty. And
we have secret societies.
That's very true.
We have secret societies of police within the force that your taxpayers are going to, that your tax money is going to.
Yeah, but do you think that really matters? That matters to people? They're like, okay, police officers,
having a secret society that's expressly racist and...
Well, there you go. That was like, okay, now you're good.
The LAPD alone has a secret society within the LAPD. I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's been proven. They actually bully cops of color and they actually, get other cops to do their fucking misdeeds. And it's all based on racism. It's a racist organization within the LAPD. And there's been multiple studies done about this organization, and it's out there. It's real. It makes it feel real. It brings light to the fact that this is a broken institution that needs to be completely reformed from the ground up.
So you're going. I don't want you to necessarily go on a tangent that would possibly lose people.
Yeah.
Because you're mentioning secret societies. So I see where you're going. So here's my question then. You talked about there's these secret societies that exist in LA. What is the possibility that there are those secret societies that exist in other police forces around the country? Is that a high probability, low probability?
I personally feel it's a high probability. If it exists here, if it exists in Los Angeles, a liberal haven, I can't even imagine what kind of nefarious things are happening in other parts of the country where there's hardly any checks on the police or accountability of the police, which is an organization that is taxpayer funded.
Right. Here's an interesting question, because the conversation of police comes up a lot, and what I always thought was interesting is that you look at police in certain neighborhoods, and a lot of them don't even live in that neighborhood. So what's happening is you actually look at it from a taxpayer standpoint. You have taxpayers paying for people that actually live in a different neighborhood to police that neighborhood. So it's like your taxpayer money, instead of going to people that actually live in your community, you're actually taking your hard-earned taxpayer dollars and you're giving it to another township. You're giving it to another district. And that raises the question, should police only be hired within the township or community that they're supposed to police?
Well, that's like a huge reform question that I think a lot of people are bringing up right now, and I think there's a lot of validity to that. Just me as a layperson who doesn't know the ins and outs of the way that police is structured in terms of like how you get your beat or whatever, or who's hired by who and where you live, but it would make sense that if you wanted to restore community trust, that you would hire within the community so the community actually knows who is policing that said community. Right.
Well, I think also too, if you are someone from the community that is policing the community, you have a better connection to that community. Yeah. So your actions will be to the betterment of that community.
Yeah. I mean, you could hear of a robbery and then X, Y, and Z person who knows this X, Y, and Z person who knew your aunt back in high school. It's like, it's a different, it actually gives police more, it would give that particular police officer more power in doing the actual job.
And it would also instill more trust in the police force, which is something that's happening right now. There's a lot of distrust. And that's a big issue because, there shouldn't be that level of distrust between the people that are supposed to, serve and protect you. So
yes, I mean, and that's what we're coming down to today, right? I mean, the people who are, we have the RNC yelling about how there's lawlessness in the streets, that, people are protesting for no reason. There isn't racism in this country. The bottom line, I mean, let's put that shit aside, is that communities don't feel safe, and they're saying they do not feel safe with the police. The way that it's currently structured.
That's interesting.
And when people are saying that, maybe you and your community feel safe with your particular police officer, but the people in these communities are saying, listen, there's a problem. We've seen it over and over again. I do not feel safe with the people that are supposed to be making me feel safe.
Right.
Their job is to protect and serve, and I don't feel that they're doing that job right now.
Right. So you're saying that the people, pretty much, the people that are supposed to protect
let's turn off the racism, blah, 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 even though obviously that's huge and important.
Right.
But like just taking that like actual that fact there, that people, no matter what their race, let's turn that off for a second, people are not feeling that somebody is doing their job.
Right. So pretty much the people that are, it's the police that are making the people in the community feel non-protected, feel unsafe. And that is where the problem is coming from, where if it's an individual whose job is to serve and protect, and that individual is the one that is causing the fear, then the question is, who then is there to serve and protect the community?
Exactly.
So now the question is kind of like, if the police are the ones that are invoking the fear or stoking the fear, who's there to protect the people from the police? And that's
Exactly.
that's okay. That's a mindfuck. That is a mindfuck.
It's obviously a problem. It's obviously, I was listening to a story the other day on the radio, and the journalist was interviewing someone who thinks that BLM is all lies and that it's being funded by, X, Y, and Z corporations and that. But at the end of the interview, the woman said, "Oh, but I don't know their experience."
Well, that's the point. That's actually the point of BLM.
It's exactly the point. Is because we're listening to people's experience. There's not thousands of people in the street for no reason or a lie. There's thousands of people in the street because there's empirical evidence that something is not working, something is not right, and we see it, and we shouldn't need to watch gore porn on the internet of these men that are getting shot to believe black voices when they're saying, when they're crying out.
It's why does it have to get to that point for you to believe that what these people are talking about is actually true? That is, listen, we've been trying to figure that out we as in people that look like me have been trying to figure that out for years. I remember looking at a photo of people protesting in the 60s, and their slogans are literally, 50% of them are exactly the same as what's happening, the slogans that we have now. So it's even in that time frame, which is pretty much, 1960 was 60 years ago? The fact that we're still having those same types of conversations.
Totally.
Listen, 60 years of the same conversation, you got to start to think. You're okay, is it noise or are they actually talking about something?
It's come on, be a little reasonable here. We're all people and we all need to come to the table and listen to each other and not just hear the politicians and telling us what to think. The RNC this week was hammering think on your own, think on your own, think on your own. Yet they're telling you exactly what to think. Instead of coming to this table and having an open ear to somebody who has had a completely different experience from you.
Yeah, but then what about the people that just don't even want to come to the table because they just think it's a bunch of noise? Because there's a lot of them.
At a certain point for me, it's almost like it's a lost cause. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally
at a certain point for me, I'm if you don't want to just come in good faith to listen, and I will come in good faith to listen to you, or what have you. It's
I don't want to preach to the choir on that point, because my philosophy is this. It's if you want to come to the table and listen, you're going to come to the table and listen. If you don't, you just choose not to. Some people, in my opinion, are lost causes. It's not pessimistic, it's being realistic.
It's just realistic, yeah.
That aside, what I find really interesting too, though, is, we were talking about the police, serving and protect, and you mentioned, fraternity, and it makes so much sense because it seems like the only people that they're actually serving and protecting is themselves. There was that footage of, the incident that happened in, let me rephrase this, and I don't care if you try to judge me for my language, the attempted murder that happened in Kenosha. Yes, I'm being very, very aggressive with this one because it's kind of ridiculous.
It is an attempted murder.
You had several officers, all armed, for one person. And what I find that's so fascinating about that is, they're all armed over one guy. And I'm not even talking about, the trigger being pulled. My question is, who are you actually trying to protect when you have 7 officers with their guns pulled for one person that clearly has no weapon? Now, in hindsight, they're saying, well, there was a weapon in the car, or he was reaching for a weapon. We can't tell if he already had the weapon. Okay. The fact that you actually have to have that speculation over if he had the weapon or if he was reaching for a weapon. First of all, the weapon apparently was a knife. One knife. There's unless he is Spider-Man or Sonic the Mother Freaking Hedgehog, there is no way one knife can mess up 7 officers.
And either way, even if you had a gun.
Well, I mean,
even if you had a gun, that's a Second Amendment right to have a gun.
Right. But my question is, it goes back to, it's not, it's less about, I'm not trying to get into the rights portion of it. The question to me is, at that stage, who are they trying to protect? Mm. And it looks like they were just trying to protect themselves. Because everyone else is screaming because they're afraid of the cops. Everyone else is saying, stay away, because you see 7 cops with their guns pulled. And the guy has his kids in the back of his car. So my philosophy is like, who are they trying to protect? And my conclusion is themselves. They are a fraternity of, they're a brotherhood or a sisterhood that sticks up for each other. They look out for each other. And, people have the argument, you don't know what police have to go through. They put their lives on the line. I understand you put your life on the line. But here's the difference, though. Here's the difference. Soldiers put their life on the line, but they don't go into the battlefield guns a-blazing. They actually have a strategy to mitigate. So my question is like, you guys are supposed to, and when I say you guys, I'm referring to officers, their job is to serve and protect civilians. And in this scenario, the civilians are afraid, not from an outside enemy, but afraid from the police. They're afraid of the police.
People protecting them.
They have these guns pulled. Based off of the footage, based off of all the information that's coming out, the only people that the officers were trying to protect were themselves. Mm. And the only weapon that was shown or seen or even spoken of was a knife. And 7 guns versus a knife, there's no way in how the knife is ever going to win. So the last part is they pull the trigger without even seeing a weapon. And it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. You're supposed to go into training to de-escalate situations. You go into training and you're supposed to use your weapon when you feel like your life is in danger.
And correct me if this is not true, or if the veracity of this is being, contested, but wasn't he there, the victim there, he wasn't even a part of the original call or the original thing?
The information, based off the information that came out, his girlfriend called the police because he was at the apartment and he wasn't supposed to be there. Hmm. So, and what's interesting about it is that his girlfriend has also come to his aid and his support because, whether he was supposed to be there or not, the consequences was not, the consequences that were given were not warranted.
Right.
It was more so like, I can understand you get in a heated debate. I don't want you here. I want you to leave. So the police officer's job is to have the individual escorted off the premises, not to pull the trigger and paralyze someone, nearly kill them in a domestic dispute. And the only people that were in danger, actually, no one was in danger, actually. That's the crazy part about it.
It's just crazy that, a domestic dispute call can turn into an attempted murder of someone.
It makes you not even want to call the police.
Yeah, why would you want to call the police next time you have a domestic dispute? If it's going to end in even worse scenario than it even started in.
Right.
What that's showing that the current system is not working.
Well, I mean, we can go back, we can, harp on the system, but I do feel that people are going to be, some people think that the system works. And here's my thing. Like, we can talk about the system, until the world's end. And we can talk about, good cops and bad cops until the world's end. But, my philosophy is this. If cops had to deal with more consequences for their actions, they would actually think differently on how they would approach situations.
No, I totally agree.
And that is kind of what I stand for. I believe that, people have to be held accountable. If like a president is not doing his job, he could be impeached. That's another conversation for another time. But like, I'm just being honest. If an employee
your job, you can get fired.
Exactly.
What I mean? You get fired, or you even get fined, or you even get, like in Harvey Weinstein's case, he broke the law, did something wrong, and now he's gonna,
right. So that's the thing,
you get prosecuted.
Especially when your responsibility is to protect and serve, and your actions are actually doing more harm than good. When your actions are the contrary to what you're supposed to be doing, that is when you need to have your job reevaluated and your services no longer needed. Think about it this way. If I worked at a law firm and my sole job was to make sure that client information did not leak to the public, but every single week, all of the private information was like flowing through all the papers and all the tabloids and just all of that, how long do you think I would have a job? They'd call me in the office and they would say, you were hired to do one thing and you have not done that thing. Therefore, your services are no longer needed.
And it would make it harder for you to get a job again. A lot of these cops, if they are, fired from a police force, they're being hired by other police forces in different counties.
Because it's a brotherhood. So the point that we're making here, at least the point that I know that I'm making, is that, there needs to be higher standards put on these officers and a reformation on how police and a reformation on how they can actually, get hired. It was so funny because I was... there was a lot of noise. People were talking about, one of the issues is qualified immunity, and they were saying get rid of qualified immunity. And I was talking to a friend of mine who works at the DA, and what was so fascinating about that was, it's not qualified immunity that's the problem, it's the scope of it. Apparently the scope of qualified immunity is so broad that it can pretty much shield them. Like, here's my philosophy. If you're a cop and you're in the middle of a shootout, I don't want you to have to think if you should shoot back. You should shoot back, and you should have qualified immunity to protect you because you are doing your job to protect yourself and others in a shootout. That makes complete sense to me. But if there's a situation and there is no shootout, and you are the first one to pull the trigger when there is no evidence of force or an actual threat, then I feel that you should be held accountable because it's your job to maintain the peace and you should be trained to know how to de-escalate situations. Therefore, I believe that the scope of qualified immunity needs to be narrowed so that, it's one of those things. It's like, if that's what needs to be done in order for cops to think differently on how they, proceed in their actions for the safety and the betterment of the community, then I think that is what they should do.
So that is so connected to everything else too. You know what I mean? Like, it is connected to the way that DAs are going to be prosecuting police when they have to work with the police. Like, that's a huge issue. Like, it's not just piece by piece, it's a whole systemic issue.
It's a whole systemic issue.
If you change one piece, you have to change another piece.
Exactly, but that's the thing. You have to start somewhere.
Right.
And I think that it's so funny because there was actually a court case that happened a while ago this year, though, where the judge, had to side with the precinct or the officers because of qualified immunity, but they explicitly felt that, the cop was in the wrong. And they explicitly felt that, the victim should have actually won the case. Mm-hmm. But because of qualified immunity in the law, the judge was not able to do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's why DAs don't take the case in, too. That's another reason why DAs don't take the case in, because they know that they're going to lose the case, and then they're also going to look like they attacked a police officer on the job. You know what I mean? And it's so related to everything.
And this is about protecting everyone. Because here's the thing. It's like, people are just like, it looks like in the media that it's only happening to black people. But qualified immunity applies to all officers in all cases. And I don't care, like, if you were a white person that lives in a wealthy suburb and you had to deal with this type of tragedy, I guarantee you, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you will not win. And the cop will get away with what they did.
Debatable.
I mean, I don't think, no. When it comes to qualified immunity, the cops win all the time.
I don't know.
Give me an example when the cops have
I don't have an example, but I'm just saying money speaks in this country.
Money talks in this country, but the law is, when it comes to qualified immunity,
seems like a lot of people are breaking the law and getting away with it, especially in the highest offices of this country.
Yeah, but we're talking about versus the police. I'm not talking about other scenarios.
Right.
I'm talking about the police scenario.
Yeah, right.
And that's the truth of the matter. Like, you look at the protests that have been happening all year, and you see that, you see the footage that's coming out. It's not just people of color that are getting beaten up and knocked down and arrested and wrapped up in zip ties. Mm-hmm. It's also, white people as well. So the thing is, it's like, listen, black people are making a lot of noise about this, but like, there is nothing saying that one day you won't be next. So this is kind of like an issue that is like, if we tackle this now, you won't have to deal with this issue in the future. If you don't tackle this now, black people are going to end up having to say, I told you so, while you guys are suffering and complaining and flipping your lids, Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, their job is to serve and protect. And if there are not laws that allow them to actually serve and protect, then that's the problem. Because right now, the law allows them to just kind of just do what they want willy-nilly. That's not serving and protecting. So the question is, it's like, you have to decide, do you want cops to be held accountable when they do something wrong or not? It literally comes down to that. If you want them to be held accountable for when they do something wrong, then we need to change the scope of qualified immunity, and we have to hold these cops accountable. Because we are so quick to praise our military and our soldiers. And my stepfather, he's in the Marines, and I gladly appreciate his work. I'll never forget when my mom was talking to him and he was in Fallujah and the base got attacked. And I just remember like the pain and the devastation in my mom's face because she was really terrified. But this is a man who was in Iraq serving his country. And even at that level, they have a strategy before they go into the war zone. They think and use their minds on how they can mitigate damage before they even get to the battlefield. They don't just run in guns a-blazing and whoever dies, dies. Whoever on their side dies, whoever on the other side dies. Their job is to mitigate damage and civilian casualties.
You're creeping a little into training now, I feel like.
No, it's 100%. Yes, training. But here's the thing, though, because training, you say that, but there are so many instances where...
Well, I was going to add to your point.
Right, because there's so many instances where someone will say, oh, well, that cop had bad training. It's a slap on the wrist type of thing, But, like, if that happened, if a soldier did something like that, he would be dishonorably discharged.
Right. Yeah.
Like soldiers, their job is to serve and protect. And if they mess up, they get discharged. A police officer's job is to serve and protect. When they mess up, nothing happens. So think about that. That's really crazy. Where a person, if here we go, if a soldier accidentally, shoots the wrong person, they do have to be held accountable and have to go up the ranks with, and they have to answer to all of those people.
There's a court system.
There's a court system, exactly. They have to answer to all of those people. And based off of what happens, their career would be on the line. Because it's not a good look when a civilian from another country gets killed.
Yeah.
But a police officer...
But it's okay when a civilian from
so
our
this
own
is what's
country
crazy.
Gets killed.
So that basically means civilian lives to another country matter more than civilian lives in America. That, pardon my language, is fucked up.
It's completely fucked up.
That is crazy, where a civilian life in a foreign country matters more than a civilian life in the United States. Because a soldier is held accountable for his mistakes, yet an officer is not. That's how you know the system needs to be rethought.
It's completely broken.
It's a broken system. When a soldier is doing more to serve and protect and is held accountable, but yet can still do his job. Mm. Can still win a war.
And also this soldier too is militarized, right? And this soldier is goes through training that is militarized.
Yeah.
That's like, we talk about how the police are actually militarized.
Listen, Marines have tanks. The Army has tanks, Marines, you got the Navy SEALs, you got people that can just paratroopers. These people are like to the nine.
So the police in the United States, their training, I would imagine, is less hours than somebody who's militarized on another in the military.
True. That's so true. Yet they can get access to a lot of those things.
Yet they have the same access to people in our military, our soldiers, to the same type of weapons, militarized weapons.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
And cops are also trained. There's been.
Why would I want that?
Well,
a soldier has to go through more training to use a weapon than a cop? That is so weird. What?
I mean, and then it goes to training. It goes back to training again. Like a cop should, be educated in this field. It should be you have to have 8 years of education to become a doctor, right? Yeah. You have to have so many years
because people's lives are on the line.
To become a teacher, you have to go to
because their education is on the line. Their future is on the line.
If somebody holds life in their hand, they're wielding a weapon that could take away life, they need to at least have as much training as a teacher does.
That's so crazy. A surgeon has to go through many, 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 many years of training before he can hold that scalpel. A doctor has to go to med school even after 4 years of undergrad before they can even be considered, and they still have to take a test.
Yeah. A mental health professional has to go through 3-4 years of training to become somebody who can speak with you about your emotions.
So wait, and cops have to go through like a couple months?
Cops do not go anywhere near that range of time.
I wouldn't want someone like that.
I think there was
putting my life in their hands.
There are articles going around.
That's terrible.
There are articles going around that were saying that beauticians are very, like my cousin's a beautician. It's not like a job that I'm downing on, but a beautician has more training hours than a police officer. Which doesn't make sense because a beautician doesn't have your life in their hands.
That's what's so fascinating.
And also, this officer who hasn't gone through training of maybe a mental health professional, a beautician, a teacher, this cop or these police, obviously, barring detectives and other members of the police force, but. Right. These police, have to do the job of all those people. So the police are doing the job of mental health professional. They're doing the job of teaching. They're doing the job of X, Y, and Z thing. They're also responding to domestic calls.
So we're putting too much on the police.
It's a confluence of all of the system happening.
Imagine your house is on fire. You call 911 and the police show up. Do you want the police to put the fire out in your house? Or do you want the fire department to put the fire out in your house?
Imagine your son who has schizophrenia, is having an episode and you have to call the police and the police have to come in and...
Well, let's just say this. Not even you have to call the police. You just call 911.
You call 911 and the police come. And
that's the last person you want to show.
That person, you don't want that person with militarized weapons and training. You don't want that. Do you want that person, taking care of your son who's having a schizophrenic episode?
No. I feel like 911 should be designed in a specific way. If my house is on fire, the fire department comes. If my house is being burglarized, the police come. Mm-hmm. If I have someone who is mentally ill, someone from the hospital that is trained in this comes. Because here's the thing.
You can social worker comes.
Exactly. Because here's my thing. You can call 911 and say, we're having dinner and someone just fainted.
Right.
Multiple choice. Who's going to show up? Will it be the fire department? Will it be the police? Will it be an ambulance?
An ambulance.
Ambulance!
So
I don't want someone to faint at dinner and then have the fire department.
I also want to make the point that, this is in support of the police, what I'm saying right now.
We're trying to alleviate their workload.
If they were better, if they had a workload that was more focused, they would be able to do their job better.
Effectively. And not have to be called to do all of these other things.
Exactly. And, I had a point and then it just disappeared right now.
No, but I'm following. I am totally on board with, I am buying what you're selling.
I think it goes back into the interconnectedness of the problem.
Yeah.
So it's as if the problem needs to be rooted up in order to replant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. I think the other thing too that gets so interesting is the aftermath of all of this. You think of a black man getting shot, and then, let me rephrase this. You think of an American citizen getting shot. An American citizen. You think of a dad with his children in the car getting shot. A father who's providing for his kids got shot to the point that he is now paralyzed, to the point that he most likely will not be able to provide for his kids because someone did not do their job correctly.
And that someone may or may not be held to account, right?
He's not going to be held accountable.
We're waiting.
So here's what's so fascinating about that, because that's the story that was publicized. But imagine all the ones that aren't. But here's what's crazy: that happens. And then a bunch of people get so angry because this happens all the time that they decide to protest, and they decide to just say, we are fed up, and they start to just, listen, look at that. It's so timely. Do you hear the sirens?
Burn shit.
It is getting real. They get fed up, they get really angry, and they decide to start protesting, and they decide to start rioting. And you know what then happens? Then the cops come with more militarized gear, because now they're like, well, we need to really protect the peace. But the truth of the matter, if they were doing their job in the first place, they wouldn't have to do that.
There wouldn't be people in
the fact that you need to have riot gear shows that there is a distrust between you and the people. A cop should never have to have riot gear. If you have riot gear, that proves that there is a disconnect, because riots happen when there are disconnects. And the fact that the cops have to be militarized with riot gear obviously shows that there is a disconnect where the cops themselves don't feel safe from the people that they are supposed to protect. Why shouldn't a cop feel safe from the people they're supposed to protect? The only way a cop doesn't feel safe is if the people don't feel safe around the cops.
Yeah, I mean,
so now the people are trying to protect themselves, and the cops are trying to protect themselves, and now we find ourselves in this situation.
So that system, the question is, does that system work? No, like that's not working. It's not working.
Because if you did your job properly in the first place, the people wouldn't be afraid of you, and you wouldn't be afraid of them.
And that is the bottom line.
And it's so fascinating too, because then that happens, and then somebody somewhere decides. I don't know whose side they're on. Somebody somewhere decides that they put a building on fire. Listen, I'm just going to say this. And you can say whatever you want, but I'm stand by this statement. Black people don't know how to make bombs. We don't know how to we don't do that shit. We don't even know where to start. And I got proof. All the arsons that happened earlier this year, they all turned out to be not black. So let's talk about Kenosha. I guarantee you, I will stand on this point. The arson was not black. We do not know how to make that shit. And I am generalizing out of the ass right now, but there's something that, listen, I know that as much as a fact as my hair is curly.
Right.
We don't know how to make bombs.
Even in LA, the people that were vandalizing and like breaking windows, a lot of those people were white or like maybe even Latino or whatever. Like it doesn't serve it doesn't serve us or it doesn't serve the movement to have that narrative turn into, instead of like talking about the black man who was unjustifiably shot 7 times in the back without a weapon, it becomes about the riots and the buildings that are being burned.
And I have two points about that. That's really interesting. 2 points about that. And I'm not going to judge you at all for this. Yeah. Do you believe black people know how to make bombs?
I believe anybody can make a bomb, I'm sure, if you look on the internet. Okay,
well, you're not playing into my hands right now. Do you, in the bottom of your heart, do you believe that a black person knows how to make a bomb?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you. We don't. There are many things that we can do, and I'm going to generalize out my ass right now just to make a point to all the people that like generalizations. We can dance. We can sing. We're good at sports. We are raised to do those 3 things.
You can jump, right?
We got the Beyoncés. You got the Kobes. Okay, you got your Ushers. I'm telling you, though. You got your Alvin Ailey's.
Were any of these buildings even bombed?
Bombs, though?
Were they bombed?
Arsons, like Molotov cocktails. I know that James Bond likes it, but I don't know what it is. I couldn't tell you. So that's all I'm saying. Anyway, generalization's over.
I mean, okay, so generalization's over. Even if people were lighting buildings on fire and they were black or whatever color they are, that doesn't take away from the anger and the real life that was actually altered, and the 2 lives that were lost in the protest when a counter protester.
Right. I don't want to get to that point yet. I don't want to get there yet because that's another dark hole.
Right.
There's something about the property that I want to talk about, though, because it's so interesting. When black people, a black person gets killed and property gets burned, the next thing you hear from a white person, I'm generalizing because this is what I've encountered. Why do they have to burn the property? What about the property? So in that conversation, you're equating a black life to property.
A human life to property.
Let's talk about, pardon my language, how fucked up that is. What were slaves considered?
Property.
It is so ingrained in our country, in our society, that black people somehow, even to this day, are somehow compared to property. The property damage, the property damage, the property damage. You can build another building. The property damage, the property damage, the property damage. People start talking more about the property damage than the actual human life that was killed.
Or the life that, yeah.
So
exactly.
the question is, why is the counter argument instantly comparing a black life to property.
I think people are deflect because they're afraid of
They're
having
deflecting.
that,
No,
that
100%.
real conversation.
They're afraid of having the conversation, but the fact that the comparison then becomes property. Someone said...
Well, if they I wish they cared more about
exactly. Someone said
black
to me...
bodies.
Someone said to me... Someone said, it doesn't have to be an eye for an eye. And that is where I then saw the problem.
Wow.
Because
that's crazy.
If you say an eye for an eye...
What building do you know has an eye?
A black person.
Like,
a black person.
What?
And then property. You're saying it's an eye for an eye, you're instantly equating the two as being equal.
And you're just getting away
and
from
that
the fucking
is
original
the problem.
Point.
The point is, though, is that there are, there is still that, and I feel like it's really intense to say it, but I still feel that there is that ingrained slave mentality in the way that people think about black lives.
Well, yeah.
Because it's like, if a black person got killed, an eye for an eye, honestly, would be a cop getting killed. That's an eye for an eye. I'm not condoning that. I don't want anyone getting killed. Let's put that straight right there. I don't want anyone getting killed. But an eye for an eye is not a building burning down. You can build another building. You cannot bring that life, that dead person back to life. And I'm going to say this. We are not property. Black people are not property, and we should not be viewed as such, and we will not be viewed as such. But I will tell you this. The reason why people are burning things down is because apparently that seems to be the only thing that people care about, and that's why people are doing it. I'm not condoning in any way whatsoever. But it seems like, saying everything else is not getting the point across. And I can understand why people are frustrated. I'm not condoning property damage. But you know something? I'm also not condoning black men getting shot. So we can complain about the symptom all we want, which is the buildings burning down. Or we can try to find a solution to the problem, which is stop shooting black people. All of this is happening in Kenosha right now. And Kenosha is just the most recent string of, protests and police brutality that's been happening in the country. That's been happening all year long. I don't know. I mean, I literally don't know.
I've had like a couple of friends, white friends in entertainment who are like, liberal, they're great people, beautiful human beings. I love them. We're putting that aside for a second, but like, it's funny because they're like, oh my God, this like new show, X, Y, and Z show that came out on HBO, Lovecraft Country. Like, oh my God, it's almost like they planned it for this year. They planned it for this. And I was like, no. They didn't plan it for this year. They didn't plan that narrative for this year about, racial narratives this year. I'm like, these narratives have been the truth of this country for 400 years, motherfucker. Like, there is no secret conspiracy by HBO to drop a narrative that's seemingly really relevant right now. Yeah. It's relevant because it's always been relevant. These narratives have always been there. And that's why people are fucking fed up. I mean, like, if somebody wasn't listening to you for 400 years, I'd burn fucking building too. So, excuse my French, but
I mean, it's,
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just a persistent problem that keeps on happening. More people are trying to speak up. And if a huge majority is speaking up and you choose not to listen, I ask you why.
It's ridiculous. It's kind of like someone being like, everyone, everyone's at the dinner table and everyone's getting like really good meals, but someone's getting dog food. And he's constantly complaining. He's like, this dog food is terrible. It's making me ill. And he's getting sick and he's getting ill. And everyone's like, why are you getting sick? Why are you getting ill? You're not living healthy. You need to change the way that you're dieting. You need to change all of these things. Stop getting sick. Maybe you should work out more. Get some more sunlight. Do this. Do that. Mm-hmm. No, I'm eating dog food. That is the problem. It's making me ill. Everyone's like, oh man, he's always sick.
And why is complaining?
About being sick. Always complaining. Like he can't even do his job.
He should be lucky that he's at the table.
Right. Like we gave him a seat at the table. Like, what is he complaining about? You know, oh my gosh, these chicken wings are fantastic.
I remember my point about 911, by the way.
You know, and the point is, everyone, listen, he's complaining about eating the fucking dog food. Stop giving him the dog food, and I guarantee you he'll stop being sick. So, simple. It's simple and easy as that. Okay? Hold these cops accountable, and they won't keep shooting black people. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science.
At least fire them. At least press charges.
That's a part of holding them accountable.
Like, that's like the very bare minimum you could do, and that isn't even being done. You know? It's just...
And then reduce the scope of
qualified immunity.
So what was you said you finally...
Oh, yeah, because, okay. So this very same people who say that they...
Daddy soda.
Daddy soda. Drink that daddy soda. Daddy. The very same people that say that they support the police, that Blue Lives Matter, X, Y, and Z, they're not even advocating for an overhaul of the 911 call system, which costs money. You know what I mean? And it's actually broken and defunct, and it's actually cost lives. Yet, you know, Republicans aren't advocating to put more money into the 911 call system. So if you want to be safe, maybe you should elect people to office that will actually support, fund, and fortify the institutions as well that actually do keep you safe, which is paying for employees
that make the system better.
That actually make the system better. So if you funneled money into that 911 system, and that 911 system could, you know, if they're call operators, they put you to the right service. You know, you reimagine the way that public safety can completely work.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. You did mention something earlier too. You were talking about, you said something about a 17-year-old.
Ah, yeah.
What were you? What was that? What were you? What was it? Where were you going with that? What about a 17-year-old?
I think it's. When I first heard about this 17-year-old kid who murdered two protesters, maimed at least one other protester.
How did he murder them?
He shot them with what it looked like an assault-style rifle.
Really? Were the cops, you know, with their riot gear trying to stop them?
So it's insane because it goes back to like who does the Second Amendment belong to in this country? I think of
well, here's the question. I mean, did the cops with their riot gear stop him, or did they just...
The cops with the riot gear did not stop them. They did not use the riot gear on this kid.
And he had a rifle in his hand?
They used the riot gear on people throwing bottles and rocks.
Wait. He had an armed rifle in his hand.
And just after he shot two protesters, he walked by a militia of police. And
then who's the riot gear for?
And nobody stopped him.
Then who is the riot gear for? Your riot gear is supposed to stop vigilantes with rifles that are shooting people.
But it just goes to show the imbalance of this whole system and the way that the cops perceive...
all of them were bad cops.
And exactly. And the way that the cops perceive who's good and who's bad, or who's a threat and who isn't. It goes back to I think of Philando Castile.
Oh,
he rightfully owned a gun. That is within his Second Amendment right, and that gun was in his glove compartment. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't have gotten shot because he was exercising his Second Amendment right. And he wasn't exercising it against the cop, he was just merely holding. And that gun was registered to that person. This 17-year-old kid, the gun was not registered to the kid.
Wow.
And the kid killed two people and then walked away. At really, like, you know, the police just kind of like, oh, well, you know, go ahead, kid. Thank you for your service.
I mean, it's the same.
That just speaks exactly to the way that this system is working right now. If you can't see that,
it's really
or even at least, I just ask you to, like, really just examine that a little bit. And examine that with the mindset that 2 lives were lost at the hands of this kid who
and the cops did nothing about it.
Who has been raised to glorify guns.
The cops have done nothing about it. You know, you also think about the shooting that happened in Aurora, Colorado.
Exactly.
He shot people at a movie theater and was handcuffed. Like, if there's any time that the officers would have to protect the people around them, including themselves, with an armed vigilante that is actually killing people, that would have been the time to do it. But let me guess, their training taught them how to de-escalate a situation and handcuff someone and bring them to justice.
Yeah, why can't it happen in a domestic dispute? Why can't it happen
with a man that doesn't have a gun that's not killing anyone? That's not killing anybody.
Why can't it happen in a no-knock raid? You know, a botched no-knock raid where nobody was killing anybody or selling drugs.
No one has. Well, that one was different because someone was firing. So there's a lot of nuances to that. I'm talking about. I'm comparing that to Kenosha.
That goes back to this man's Second Amendment right to fire back.
Oh yeah,
you know,
he has a right to fire back.
He
has no idea idea if they were officers or not, like knocking on his door trying to get into his apartment.
Exactly, but yes,
to him he's like, I'm trying to protect myself and my girlfriend. I don't know; these could be robbers trying to get in here.
There has been an avalanche of footage of white people running away from police, of socking police, of stealing police cars, and police don't shoot.
Because
what is the disparity there?
The disparity is simple. They are actually applying their training when it comes to white people. But when it comes to black people, that training goes out the door because apparently to them, a black life is not equal to a white life. Now, if you disagree with what I'm saying, why was the training used properly in those situations, especially in Aurora, where a white man killed people in a movie theater, yet left handcuffed?
And yes, you can say it's regional and this and that. It's not regional.
It's not. It happens everywhere.
It's systemic. It happens everywhere.
Eric Garner was choked to death, and he didn't even have a weapon.
You know, in LA alone, there have been so many deaths.
He got choked to death for a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly. There was a black man who was in my 24-hour fitness changing room, in the locker room, who was mentally ill, who was shot dead by police in that.
You might lose him in the 24-hour fitness.
I don't go there
There are
anymore.
people in Missouri that are probably watching this. Nothing against Missouri.
But you know, it's like de-escalation, the proper training, the amount of training. There are things that need to be fixed. And to say that the system is working right now is just completely turning a blind eye to the reality of what's happening on the ground.
I just thought of something that could actually be revolutionary. When the Voting Rights Act was put in place, it was designed to protect the voting rights of African Americans that were being disenfranchised by the system because local governments found ways through the law to disenfranchise them and pretty much making it hard for them to vote.
Yes.
The Voting Rights Act put rules in place that prevented states from doing that.
Certain
so
principalities.
Right. So here's the question. They had to actually get clearance before they pass certain laws. Do you think that we need something like that in our police system towards African Americans? Because when the Voting Rights Act was passed, African Americans were finally able to vote freely to the same degree as white Americans.
So it's changing based on the district, changing police policy based on the district.
Putting a law that holds them more accountable to make sure that their actions aren't racially biased.
It's interesting.
The same way the Voting Rights Act was put in place to hold people accountable to make sure that their voting laws weren't racially biased. Listen, I feel like that's putting a Band-Aid on the situation, but it's a step in the right direction because it comes down to race, whether you choose to accept it or not. And if you choose not to accept it, I'm sorry for you. You're living in Disneyland, and one day Disneyland might get burned up.
Well, I'm happy for you that you don't.
I'd love to live in Disneyland.
Yeah, I'm happy for you that you don't need to live in a world where you're afraid of the police. I think that's great. But we don't walk in your shoes. You don't walk in our shoes. We all have different experiences. You can't just use your own experience across the board.
I mean, here's my thing. Like I said, you look at some of the things that have been happening with the protests, and it's like,
especially when you have video evidence.
You look at these protests, and it's like they're not just using riot gear against black people. They're using it against white people. Apparently, not unless you're armed with a rifle shooting other people. But here's the thing. Right now, it's black people. But there's nothing saying that it won't be you next.
Exactly.
And so it's not a black problem. It's not a white problem. It's not a Latino problem. It is a every person problem. People with power need to be held accountable. If you want your politicians to be held accountable, then you need to have your officers be held accountable. If you want your doctors to be held accountable, then you need your officers to be held accountable. If you want to make sure that your child is going to the best school to get the best education from the best teachers or the best university, and you want to make sure that the money you're spending is being used to actually have these teachers and professors do their job, you're holding them accountable. You should feel the same way with your tax dollars for your police in your neighborhood, because it could be you.